Dete Meserve, we are talking about your new collection and your fifth book. We're going sci-fi this time. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm excited about it.
When you switch genres essentially and go through a new format, is it something that like obviously I'm wearing a Star Wars t-shirt. It's 70th anniversary of Disney. Mickey bought Lucasfilms, so we're just keeping everything in theme and coming full circle with all of this. But when you move through genres. I mean, writing is writing and storytelling is storytelling. But are there elements where, you change genres and you're like, this isn't necessarily my forte, but I'm a little happy to do this because I'm a fan of this subject matter. Like, how does the genre jumping work?
Well, I have been a space geek forever. First of all, I did 67 half hours of Ready, Jet, Go in association with the Jet Propulsion Laboratory here in Los Angeles. And so I'm also a NASA grandchild. My grandmother worked at NASA. So I've always had this interest in space and in science since forever. And time travel has always fascinated me. I've read all the literature, watched all of the books, watched all the movies rather. And for me, it's just been something that's always been invading in my writing. And I have several other things that I started to write, but never really could figure my way around it. But where this really hit for me was some of the new science that's out there. And that's, John Norton, who believes now, based on his mathematical models as a physicist, his work was recently published by the American Institute of Physicists, that we could travel in time using like a conical shape to travel back in time. So that was really compelling. And then there's the research that's been done by Dr. Fabio Costa at the University of Queensland, which is kind of groundbreaking because we also think, oh, well, even if we could travel to the past, we would want to because of the grandfather paradox or the idea that we're going to change the future in even a small way. But his new mathematical theory presents the idea that even though there are these closed time loops, the universe would right itself and that there wouldn't be paradoxes. And this is mathematically, a theory. So both of those, when you look at them through that lens, offer the opportunity to really rethink what is time travel. It is like Back to the Future, which they go back to the past, but they're trying to make sure they don't change enough things that they wipe out their own existence. So it's not that. It's not like even Stephen King's book, 11/23/64, if I get the year right, where he's trying to go back in time to change what happens with Kennedy's assassination and multiple times tries to do that. What if you don't have to worry about that? What if you literally are just going back in the past? You can spend an hour, spend whatever time that is, and not worry about paradoxes. And that's what I really wanted to play with in the Memory Collectors because it comes into a brand new narrative, doesn't it?
Right, but could it also play into, and before we get into the book, there's the whole butterfly effect. There's the whole Mandela effect that we've been hearing about now, where things have changed in different memories, Berenstein Bears versus Berenstein Bears and things of that sort. And then the moment of, if you're just there for an hour and someone walks around you and changes the whole trajectory of their life and their existence, so there is the philosophical aspect of that, but the mathematical interest is there. But there's also the observational aspect of what if I'm just there as a conscious observer without getting in anybody's way? Does that affect anything?
Yeah, so that's where Fabio Costa's researches and that mathematical model says we would not be creating paradoxes or being able to change the future. So that's really what I imagined is if you went back for that reason, to your point, it changes everything because instead of being worried, oh, if I say this or I say that, which locks you into, pre-formatted what happened in that moment, it gives you the opportunity to observe different things, to do different things without having to worry that the future is going to get changed by that. And that's really the root of that theory is that that you can't change anything. So what happens is that you come back changed. If you imagine you went back to your life in your own body 20 years ago, you would notice things that are different. You would might listen to a conversation differently with a perspective that you have from today. You might ask different questions. So if you have, like, for example, present day mysteries or questions about your own life, you would come with that perspective and be able to find out those answers in a way that only time travel can allow you to do.
And so this leads us to the memory collectors and going through, first your inspiration and then now taking it into the book itself. There has to be that spark, that moment that, ooh, now I got to sit down and write. And do you just start writing in that regard? Do you do the old school, here's the premise with the thought bubble and all the little lines that all our teachers used to make us write in school that I hated more than anything?
Right.
What is the thought process that comes in first? Like, what's the spark? And then what led to the expansion of the story?
So I was actually writing a different book at the time. And then I had a dream where I will tell you, in the dream, traveled back in time 20 years. I was talking to my sister. I noticed she looked different. I even asked her in the dream, how old are you? And she kind of got mad like she would, like I should know how old she is. And then as I'm talking to her, I hear someone say, Mommy. And it's my son who's now well into his 20s and he's 4. And in the dream, I know every detail. I smell what his little boy smells like, right? And can see the pink stain on his cheeks. I can see his haircut, what he's wearing. It feels very, very real. And when I woke up, I was just obsessed with that dream. I wrote it down and I thought about it a lot. And I realized it was making me ask a lot of questions. What if we could travel in time? What would we see with fresh eyes if we could travel back in time? What would we feel differently with the perspective that we have? So I started writing the story, and really the characters kind of came first. For me, the creative process is not a linear one. It's more of all over the place. And those characters spoke to me. There are 4 characters in the Memory Collectors, but they're representations of the very many different ways that we have of being human. Like one person wants to go back because he's lost the love of his life. And this is a person he was falling in love with, and then she disappeared. So he has questions about that. And another goes back because she's lost her son and he died in a mysterious accident, and she wants to spend more time with him and maybe also to try to understand what happened. So each one of them represents an aspect of ourselves as humans, love for other people, love, appreciation for our body, wanting to have some connection to our child. And then that's really what came first. And then the story starts to develop. So that became sort of the secondary aspect of what's the mystery? How are all those people connected in ways they didn't know? How do we make sure that all of that works in terms of the science that's the underpinning? That really became second. But first the characters came to mind.
Yeah. Yeah, because there's always that, and then there's the selfish person that wants to stay behind and not come back to the modern time. People like me whose knees were much healthier 20 years ago than they are now. So it's interesting
Yes.
in that concept. So what happens when you get this notion while you get the idea to write a new book while you're still writing the other book? You know, how do you not put the other one down and then pick this one up if this one sparked greater inspiration than what you were working on at that time?
I did. That's exactly what I did. You're absolutely right. So it became sort of almost so obsessive for me to write this that I actually called my agent and talked to her and said, look, I know I've told you I'm getting ready to I'm working on this other book, but this idea really, really speaks to me. And I'm a big believer that when creativity is constantly around us, and when something really sparks, to use the word you used earlier, you got to follow that spark, even if you're not exactly sure where it's going to go. So that's when I dropped the other book, which I am now in the process of trying to finish, and look at what is facing me right now and why this story has to really resonates with me. And so that's what I did. I literally dropped the other book and said, let's focus 100% on this one.
I just love that you're writing a sci-fi book and your process is very Mary Shelley, Frankenstein monster concocted.
Yes, because I'm very left brain, right brain. I think writers have to be, right? There is the part of us that has all the wild imagination and what if this happens and what if that happens? But then there's also, and that's also the producer in me as well, this person that's like, how do you get it done? And what are the steps to get it done? And what are you going to need in order to get there? But a lot of times I'll put that person over in the corner in terms of saying, you know what, right now I'm playing. I'm exploring what this world feels like. We'll figure that out at the right time. And so I bring that person. I know I sound like I'm two people, but that thinking when it's time, because in the beginning, you want to have all the play and all the time to really explore all the possibilities before you start, bringing in the thoughts of like, how are you going to do that, right?
Mhm. Now, since your sister showed up in your dream and your son showed up in your dream, how much of their personas and personalities end up in the characters? And when they read your work, go, wait a minute, that was just a moment between us. How come it's in the story? Or, that didn't really happen the way it did. Obviously, it's sci-fi, so it's not going to happen the way it did in real life, but, fictionalized moments of reality.
Yeah, that's a really good question because you know what? My son read the first chapter, which is essentially the dream, right? And he was like, Mom, I don't have memories of being this little. So for him, he couldn't argue with me of whether or not that really happened or not. But I will tell you that the dream hit on a lot of things that are true. He was a kid that loved Transformers and was always trying to transform them. So even in the very beginning, when I turn around in the dream and he says, "Mommy" to me, he's asking me to transform his transformer, which I thought that's the most beautiful metaphor for a transformation, right? And so that's a real thing that actually happened in the dream, but he doesn't remember. And that's the thing about memory is that we don't often remember some of these central moments in our lives when we're 3 or 4. So for him, this was like reading history. And I had to remind him that I actually never did time travel, at least I don't think so, but that he definitely loved Transformers and always needed help transforming them.
Right. When it's a sci-fi story like this, is it a little more fun when it's based in reality because you have the confines of a realistic situation versus, say, Star Wars or Star Trek, which two-thirds of what they've done has went from science fiction to science fact? You know, I mean, we have video calls, which what we're doing right now, Star Trek. We have our cell phones, Star Trek. We have the only thing we don't have are phasers no, we actually do, stun guns. So we
Yes.
have so we have the stun gun from Star Trek. So we have so much that has come from science fiction that's become science fact. When you can be that fanciful like Star Wars and Star Trek and various other entities, and then something like your story where it's more confined into a reality base, is that freeing or constrictive in this regard?
I think it's freeing because then I can make it relatable to you as a reader, or ultimately, if this becomes a TV series, you as a viewer, you can put yourself in that situation in that moment. So I actually set this in the very, very near future, as if time travel was something that you could, like you go to Blue Origin, you sign up and want to go, right? And that gave me more freedom to really not have to make up what people might do or how people might talk or what they would wear. I could keep things that are familiar to you, but then make the situation be the novelty and not have to build out this very complicated world that people might poke holes into. It's like your world today, except for you have time travel.
Right. No, I like the concept with everything like that. So we're going to put you on the spot with this. All right. Two situations. All right. Someone in your personal life without mentioning them by name that at a moment you'd be like, you know what? I wish I could send you back to 1993 and keep you there because you've been getting on my nerves all day. And is there a specific moment in time that you would like to return to revisit?
Oh, wow. Those are biggies.
Mhm.
So on the first one, it would have to be someone that I know today that I would like to send them back and have them be stuck in 1993 forever. Is that what the,
Basically, yeah.
okay.
Not a politician because everyone has their least favorite politician that they want to send back. I'm saying someone like in your life that are like, if I could send you somewhere, it's you, it's this time period, and just shut you in over there.
I don't have anybody, honestly, that I would want to not have in my life. I absolutely couldn't think of anyone that I know that I would want to banish back into 1993. But you're definitely going to make me keep thinking about that for a while. But let me answer the other, because I have obviously thought about this the whole time I was writing the book. And I actually was sharing with a friend of mine. I'm like, oh, the cheat is to ask for a time where all the people that you've loved and lost are there, right? Your grandparents, your uncles and aunts, and in my case, my parents. I would go back to my wedding, not just because I got married, but because they were there at the reception. And I would go back and talk to them in a way that I didn't. I was focused on, did the photos look good? Does my hair look good? I'm so tired, right? All of those things that a bride goes through. But I will say to you, that's actually too easy of an answer. And I realized that as I was finishing the novel, that to go back to like a joyous moment, that's actually probably not the most transformative. What would be most transformative for me is actually to go back to, I have three kids, they're all adults now. And I would go back to a moment in the grocery store when all three of them were having tantrums and I was with them, thought I was the worst parent in the world. And one was in middle school and complaining that he was there. The middle one was running around knocking things off the shelf. The youngest one was crying because I wouldn't buy her a balloon. And I thought, everyone's looking at me. I'm terrible. I'm failing. And I would go back now with today's perspective and go, you were not failing. Look how young these guys are. Listen to their little voices. See how lucky you are. See this moment. Nobody was actually looking. No one's judging you. You were not a terrible parent, right? That kind of perspective, I think all of us could give on so many moments where we were embarrassed or we were mortified at what happened or didn't like how we handled something. And with the perspective of time, we might be more forgiving on ourselves. And we also might see things that we have forgotten about, that we don't realize were really there all along. And that's probably where I would go back to the big tantrum in the grocery store here in LA.
All right. Now I'm going to get you in trouble with your husband with this question.
Uh-oh.
What version of him would you like to pull into your present life? Like
Oh,
you're still this
wow.
age, but it's like whether if he still had all, I don't know what he looks like. So, I'll throw myself in there with the baldness, and whether if he still had all of his hair, whether he was still 50 pounds lighter, whether, he didn't have arthritis. I'm just throwing random stuff out there. But like which version of him would you like to pull into your modern life and be like, ooh, I can spend another, 15 hours with this version of him?
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. It's not going to get me in trouble with him, but I don't think anyway, but it could. You never know. I would go back to a time before we were even dating, when we knew each other. And I think he was flirting with me, but I was sort of oblivious with it, sort of focused on other things and not really noticing it. I would like to go back to that because that was obviously what he says happened, but I just don't remember being mindful that he was flirting with me and saying flirty things to me. I just thought he was just another friend, right? And I would like to go back to that, to see him like that and to see him trying to win me over. Because after you've been married for a while, that, husbands don't do that anymore and wives don't either. You're not trying to win the other person over, but I'd like to experience what that felt like at a time when I really don't think I appreciate it as much as I would today.
So you want to pull in the era of him with no social skills while trying to impress you. I get it. Okay.
Exactly. You put it right.
So with the memory collectors, first of all, the name itself, going back in your own physical manifestation of a younger version of yourself, you know, how did the name itself come about? Because obviously there's like 7 or 8 working titles at some point, and then this is the one that sticks. How is this the title that stuck for this book?
So in the book, they get stuck and stranded in time. And that creates quite an uproar because this thing is supposed to be safe. And that the news media gets a hold of them. And so they were dubbed by the news media the memory collectors. And that's really what stuck to me. I wanted to make sure you understood from reading the title that this was about more than one person. And this was people going back to relive memories. And I thought, as I was writing that, that was the perfect title. There really weren't other titles that were floated. At one point, somebody's like, oh, if only. And I was like, but that could be like a romance novel. The Memory Collectors really spoke to me because it really felt like it was tied to what happens in the book. And it also was tied to what we all are doing when we would travel back. We're collecting memories. We're making new memories. We're looking at our memories, collecting them and coming back.
Yeah, I like that. Good. There's a reason behind it. It's not just
Yes.
the curtains in the room were blue, so I put in blue curtains in the story.
No, definitely
You, as things progress, book signings, what are we looking forward to with the book, with the memory collector? How are we going to get a hold of you to get a signed copy of this?
Okay, well, I'll answer the signed copy easy enough because actually on my website, there's a place you can go to an independent bookstore here in LA. There's a link to it, and they will have me inscribe whatever you want me to inscribe in it and ship it out to you. That makes it really easy because a large part of my fan base is all over the country, not necessarily here in Los Angeles. So that's easy. I do have a big book event at a local independent bookstore on Wednesday, and then another one in LA. Then I'm going to go head near where the book takes place, which is Ventura, California, and head to an independent bookstore there called Bart's. And then in the fall, New Orleans and Chicago, which is where I'm originally from. And that's kind of what I'm looking forward to. But I have a big presence on social media. So even though people consider that virtual, for me, it feels very real. These are readers that write me regularly or message me on Facebook or on Instagram. And so I'm looking forward to their feedback as they read the book and start reviewing it and telling others about that and sharing with me what resonated with them.
All right. I'm going to get you in a little more trouble before we get into the socials and let everybody know where they can pick up Memory Collector since you are from Chicago. All
Yes.
right. All right. What is your take on Pope Leo being a White Sox fan instead of a Cubs fan?
Oh my goodness.
Let's get you in
I
trouble with
could
all of
not.
Chicago.
It is a huge, huge problem that he's a White Sox fan, but we'll have to forgive him for it. I will forgive him. I just want to know, does he have ketchup on his hot dog? And if he does, then that's a real problem
That
because we
then
all know not allowed.
then that's delayed sainthood in Roman Catholicism for the Pope. He's got to spend at
Yeah,
least a year and a
exactly.
half in purgatory for ketchup on the hot dog.
Ketchup on the hot dog is a big no-no.
See, where can we find you on social media if we want to connect with you, your website, everything else, all the stuff that you're working on right now that we can bother you with and try to get the book signed?
The funnest for especially for sci-fi fans, go to aeonexpeditions.com, Aeon spelled Aeon, meaning forever. And that's the name of the time travel company. So I've created a website which you can go through and immerse yourself in that world, taking things that are directly from the book to help you understand, like, what would happen there, what is it about, and how are people's lives being changed by that. So that'd be the first one because it's the most fun. Of course, you can always go to detemeserve.com. There's only one Dete Meserve, so it's pretty easy if you can remember how to spell my name, Detemeserve. There's a lot of E's in there. And that's another great way to find all the links to the book and other materials, interviews, and book club questions are there exclusively. So that's super, super fun. And you can find me on Instagram, and of course, as that name, Dete Meserve, because it's only one of me. And also on Facebook. I have a rather big author profile on Facebook that's separate than my personal profile, and it's facebook.com Good Sam Book. It's named that because that was my first novel, and I didn't know I was going to be writing 5 more after that. But it's really easy to find me there, and it's a great place where I can communicate with people about what's happening with my books, but also more recently, a big post about time travel, which has gotten a lot of interest. So I'm looking forward to finding people wherever they are, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, even.
Well, is there hope for a sequel to this where people go forward into the future instead of back, since all the theories are time is not linear?
Oh my gosh, I would love to do that. Believe me, it has crossed my mind to write a sequel to The Memory Collectors. My focus right now is on finishing that book I told you about that I had started before, but it's definitely on the list because I think there's so many more stories going forward in time. There are different people you could send back in time, as you point out. Some people might like to go back in time and never be found. Some people might want to go back there and hijack what Aeon is about, which is just, an experience, but maybe try to manipulate that in some way so they don't go back, or they can get revenge on someone, even if it doesn't affect the future. You can imagine the kinds of stories that you could tell with time travel this way. So, yeah, there's just the only thing I need is time.
Well, thank you so much for your time. It's been a great pleasure chatting with you. Thank you for having a sense of humor
Yes.
as well, where we didn't also spoil the book for everyone because we want them to go pick it up and read it.
You bet. It was so much fun to hang out with you and talk with you. And thank you so much for the time together.
Absolutely. No, I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you.